and welcome back to my Dandelion Diaries. Today we are on ink exploration, oh gosh, like 14 I think, but this is browns part 2. We're going to be continuing with light browns. So if you missed the other one, it was dark browns, and I will have the playlist, all of my ink explorations down in the description box, and I'll also leave it in the cards somewhere up here. As for supplies, we have my A5 𝗏𝗏 notebook here with the original Tomoe River paper. I have a little tape dispenser here, which I've been using to hold the sample vials, which was inspired by Karina Loves to Plan. I have a little plastic dropper today, a Kakimori brass dip pen with the Sakura wood handle, a little condiment cup, which was inspired by Leanne Likes, a t-shirt, which I'm using as a little rag, a jar of water, and then 11 inks today. I have technically 3 bottles, and then what's that, 7, 8 samples. So we're gonna just start on the side and work our way over. And the very first ink I want to put into light brown category is Pilot Iroshizuku Ina Ho. This one is a discontinued ink, and it is also an ink that I put into a different ink exploration. I actually included Pilot Iroshizuku in my olive ink exploration because I felt it was a little bit more green than totally brown. However, I will say I wanted to include it in the light browns as well because it's still pretty brown, so I want to make sure we're giving it a fair chance here. Pilot Iroshizuku Ina Ho is a wonderful shading color, and it, like I said, is discontinued from the Pilot Iroshizuku line. But I hope they come back with it at some point just because it is so loved by the community, and it is just a wonderful ink in terms of behavior and overall quality, in my opinion. The next ink we have here is a Ferris wheel press, and it is Workshop Wishes, and it is a shimmering ink. Of all the light brown inks that we are going to be swatching today, this is by far one of my favorites. In terms of the shade, it's like this nice warm beige color, and it has this beautiful champagne shimmer. It is absolutely stunning, and I'm so glad I was able to get a bottle of it when they had them in stock because I don't think they are available any longer. The next ink we have is another one of the shimmers, and this is Diamine's Dusted Truffle. This ink is such an interesting shade in my opinion. It's almost gray, but it's still really brown. And I love that in the Diamine Ink Vent Green edition, this is the 2022 one, they included a shade like this. And I think the name Dusted Truffle is such an interesting one because it's kind of brown, but it's kind of gray, maybe like dust. I don't know. I know it's supposed to be like a dessert kind of name, especially a holiday dessert considering it is from the ink vent, but I find this ink really intriguing. This ink does have a shimmer to it, and it is the last shimmer ink I'm including in this specific category, but it is a beautiful silver shimmer, and I think it complements that kind of grayish brown color that it already has. The next ink I have is a crowd favorite, or a favorite among many at least, and it is Ferris wheel press Oyster Hour. I will say when I first swatched this ink and honestly tried it out, I was not a fan. I thought it was really much too light and that it wasn't really all that awesome. However, after using it in my, I believe, August currently inked, I put this in a broad Kaweco Sport, and it was so stunning. It was gorgeous, and I just loved the way it looked in terms of shading. The shading in this ink is really quite beautiful, and I can see why it's so loved by so many now. The next ink I have here is Troublemaker's Tuslob Buwa, I believe is how it's pronounced. It is maybe considered more of a medium brown, but I think it's a little bit lighter, and that's why I wanted to include it in the light browns. I will say this ink is a really cool shader. It has some nice shading to it, and it is a bit of a yellow undertone, maybe more like the Ina Ho in terms of color, but the dryness of the Troublemaker inks is something that I am beginning to notice the more of them that I test out. So if you don't like dry inks, maybe don't go for this one. The next ink I have here is, I think it's 𝗂𝗚𝗃 is how you pronounce the brand name. It's KYOIRO, but this is Gion's Cobblestones. And again, this one's kind of like a little bit of an off light brown, maybe more of a gray light brown, much like the Dusted Truffle, just minus the shimmer. I honestly really like this ink. I have not had the chance to write with it in terms of large journaling pages, but I think the color of it is so unique that it's such a cool toned, light grayish brown color. It's just a really interesting ink, and I'm happy to have it in my collection. The next ink I have here is moving into more of the warmer light browns, and this is Akkerman Hop, I think it's Jes Bruin. Again, my pronunciation of inks is not always the best, so don't take what I say as total law. When you first swatch this ink, it actually looks very orange, and I always find it super interesting to watch it dry down into a different color. When I originally was trying out Akkerman inks, I was on the hunt for SBRE Brown, which I already got and will be coming in a video soon. But this one was the next closest one that I could find. It is just a little bit more orange and a little bit lighter than SBRE Brown, but it's still a beautiful color in terms of shading, and I hope you guys can see that as it dries down on the page. The next ink I have here is Inkebara Caramel. And we are going to continue on with more of the warmer light browns, and this is one of my absolute favorites. I feel like Inkebara is a brand that needs a little bit more attention these days. They have quite a few inks on Vanessa, and I feel like the colors they have in terms of selection is pretty broad, and the quality of the ink is really good. Like, I've never had any issues with skipping or dryness or anything like that. The next ink I have here is another Ferris wheel press, and this is Autumn in Auburn, I believe. This was in part of their Canada collection. I believe it's Auburn. I may be wrong. That is one of the downsides of the small little ink vials, is that they don't have names on them. They just have the letters of whatever they chose to put on the little label. So it's kind of a guessing game based on what you think the name actually is based on what the letters are. I feel like Ferris Wheel Press named this ink very well because it reminds me of like burnt autumn leaves after they have fallen from the trees and everything's kind of like dying down on the ground. And I think it's quite a beautiful orangey, warm brown color. It may be considered, again, more of a medium brown, but I still think it's a little bit lighter than, I guess, a true brown, and that's why I wanted to include it in this one. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Continuing on, we have the next sample here, which is KWZ Honey. And I was recently told that all KWZ inks have a scent, and they do smell like vanilla, but I didn't know it was part of all of their inks. So if you are not a fan of smells, I would probably shy away from this brand just because every ink seems to have that vanilla scent. I find it quite pleasant because I guess I like that kind of the scent of that, but if you're sensitive to smells, just keep that in mind. Again, this ink might be considered a little bit more of a standard brown, but I think it's warm and light, and I really wanted to include it in the light browns. Plus, if you've ever raised bees or seen natural honey coming off the comb, this is exactly what the shade looks like. And honestly, when this dries down, you will get to see the beautiful shading of the ink itself. And if I could paint a honeycomb, I would paint it with this ink hands down, and it would look spot on and to the real thing. And the last light brown ink we have today is going to be a Pen Chalet exclusive, and this is Robert Oyster's Scorpion. Now, if you haven't heard me talk about my love for exclusive Robert Oyster inks, you can hear it from me again in this video. I feel like every exclusive Robert Oyster ink, whether it be with Vanessa, Pen Chalet, Goulet, Atlas, I can't think of any more off the top of my head, but all of their like exclusive inks are absolutely stunning. And this one is no exception. The shading on this specific brown, yellow, orange ink is fantastic. When I finish this sample, I will be getting a bottle of this one. I think it is stunning. I love the different tones that it has. It is, honestly, if I had to pick a favorite of the warm light browns, it's going to be this one. It's either going to be KWZ Honey or it's going to be Robert Oyster Pentale Scorpion, and I would pick those two over anything else on this page. The shading on these two are just, they're beyond comparison. They're so beautiful. Alrighty, so I'm going to let all of these inks dry down for a few more minutes. This page is pretty much dry, but obviously these ones still need a little bit more time, and then I will see you guys in a minute and we'll do some close-ups. Alright, so they have pretty much dried all the way down. I'm going to go ahead and zoom you guys in and we'll go over each individual swatch. So starting with the first one here, Pilot Iroshizuku Ina Ho. Absolutely love this ink. It is still one of my favorites. It is still light greenish olivey colored to me. I don't really consider it a brown, but I did want to include it just because it does have some brown shading, so I feel like it needs to be represented here as well. Then we had Ferris will Press Workshop Wishes. Look at the shimmer. It's so pretty. I love the shading in this ink too. It's a gorgeous light beige base with some medium brown shading, and then that champagne-y silver shimmer with it looks so beautiful. I love it so much. Then we had Diamine's Dusted Truffle. Again, a nice beigey color. It's a little bit more cool toned than the Workshop Wishes, but it still has that gorgeous kind of silvery shimmer with the medium brown shading. I think this one would be really nice too if you just took the ink up without the shimmer, and I think it would look just fine. Then we had the infamous Ferris will Press Oyster Hour. Just, yeah, the shading on this one does it for me. Like I said, when I first watched it, I was like, it's okay. And then when I actually wrote with it for a long period of time, especially in a broad nibbed pen, it was absolutely gorgeous. Having the different shading on the pages, it was really nice. And then we had Troublemaker's, I think it's, like I said, Tuslob Buwa, yeah, maybe. The shading on this one is really quite stunning. It does have a very minor, and I mean minor, black sheen. It's not super intense, but the shading is more brown versus the base is maybe a little bit more olive, kind of like the Ina Ho, but y'all let me know what you think. On the other page, we started off with Iro Gion's Cobblestones. Again, a very cool toned, kind of gray leaning light brown. There's no sheen. It is a little bit still wet there in that one spot, but there's no sheen, just a little bit of that darker shade to it, which is really nice. Then we had Akkerman's Hop Jes Bruin. Again, more of a very orangey, kind of light brownish color, a really warm color, honestly. It does look a lot more orange on camera than I think it is on paper. Just know that it is pretty brown in person. It's just a very warm brown. But I will say this one has a very minor black sheen as well, and may be considered a bit more medium brown, but I still wanted to put it in this category. Then we had Ferris will Press Autumn in Auburn. I like the shading on this one. It is, again, like I said, it reminds me of Autumn. It's a very good name, very well named. But it's pretty flat ink. It's not super intense with anything. I think it's a really good standard one if you needed a nice warm brown to write with on the regular. Ferris will Press inks are a little bit drier. Just keep that in mind. So if you like it, maybe add some white lightning to it or put it in a very wet flowing pen. Then we had Inkebara Caramel. I love the shading on this one. It does have a little bit of a black sheen to it. I just, something about this ink is so fun to look at. Like I said, Inkebara is an underrated brand in my opinion. I think we need to see more of them, and I'll try to include them in more videos. Then we had KWZ Honey. Again, I love this ink. The shading on this one is stunning. The dark brown to light brown, it's like honey. It really does look like honeycomb if you ever get to witness that in person. There is a very minor black sheen to it. It is still kind of wet in that one corner, but I really like this ink. These bottom two inks down here are definitely my favorites. And then we had Robert Oyster's Pentale exclusive Scorpion. And as you can see, that shading, I mean, come on. It's so pretty. It's like this warm, medium brown, black sheen to this yellowy, light, warm brown. You can kind of see the shading in the writing right here. It's just so pretty. I definitely will finish out the sample and get a bottle. It's just too pretty to pass up. Alrighty, so that is it for our browns number 2. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think I was fair that all of these are light brown considering I just did dark browns? I do think a few on this side could be probably considered medium browns, but I have quite a few in that category which will be coming soon. So let's hold off on that one for just a minute. If you have any questions about any of these inks or anything I used today, please leave them down in the comments and I will get back to you as soon as I can. And then also if you're interested in any more of the ink explorations I have done, like I said, I will leave a link to the playlist in the description and I will also put it up in the cards. For now, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I really do love making these videos and they're so much fun to play with all the different inks I have in my collection, and I hope you guys enjoy them too. But like I said, thanks for watching and I will see you in the next one. Bye.